My father says you need a wife. The words landed in the middle of the charity luncheon like a judgment, drawing a few amused smiles from the people seated around the table. Across from the woman who had spoken, Jack Carter simply folded the napkin beside his untouched coffee and looked toward the window. No embarrassment. No anger. No desperate attempt to defend himself. Yet somehow that calm silence made the billionaire CEO hesitate for the first time all afternoon. Victoria Sterling had expected irritation, maybe even gratitude. Instead, she found herself staring at a man who seemed strangely unmoved by what would have rattled most people. Outside the diner, an aging blue pickup truck sat beneath a fading American flag, its paint weathered by years of sun and snow. It looked as ordinary as its owner, but there was something about Jack Carter that didn't fit the picture everyone thought they understood. 3 hours earlier, before sunrise painted the small Ohio town in pale gold, Jack was already awake. The kitchen light glowed softly above stacks of school forms, a half-finished science project, and a utility bill marked overdue. He poured pancake batter onto a griddle, while simultaneously helping his 12-year-old daughter Emma memorize vocabulary words for a spelling test. Photosynthesis, she said, chewing a piece of toast. Jack smiled. You got it. He never mentioned that he had skipped lunch 3 days in a row to cover her field trip fee. He never mentioned that the overdue utility bill had been sitting there for weeks because Emma needed new asthma medication first. The old farmhouse remained quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a freight train crossing town. Some sacrifices announced themselves. Others stayed hidden in plain sight. After dropping Emma off near the crowded school hallway, Jack drove to Carter Automotive, the repair shop where he worked 6 days a week. The garage smelled of motor oil, hot metal, and fresh coffee. Customers came and went. Jack fixed what was broken. He listened more than he spoke. Around noon, an elderly woman arrived carrying a grocery bag and a worried expression. Her car wouldn't start again. Jack spent 20 minutes diagnosing the problem. When she reached for her wallet, he gently shook his head. You need that money more than I do. The woman blinked back tears. Jack simply returned to work. He never noticed Victoria Sterling watching from across the street. She had come to town to inspect a manufacturing property her company planned to acquire. Instead, she found herself curious about the mechanic everyone seemed to know. Curious enough to ask questions. Curious enough to learn he was raising his daughter alone. Curious enough to accept her father's unusual suggestion. By late afternoon, the church parking lot next to the diner was nearly empty. Victoria sat across from Jack now, studying him carefully. Her father, a retired business magnate who had met Jack during a local fundraiser months earlier, had spoken highly of him. Too highly, she thought. My father says you need a wife, she repeated, trying to recover her confidence. He thinks you've spent too many years taking care of everyone except yourself. Jack glanced toward the window again. Outside, Emma was laughing beside the pickup truck while helping an elderly church volunteer carry folding chairs into storage. Pride softened his tired eyes. Then he answered quietly. No, Victoria frowned. No. Jack's gaze remained on his daughter. What I need, he said gently, is to make sure my little girl never doubts she's enough. For a moment, even the clatter of dishes inside the diner seemed distant. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came. Because something in his voice carried the weight of years she couldn't yet see. Years of sacrifice. Years of promises kept. And perhaps a secret that neither she nor anyone else in town fully understood. What Victoria didn't know was that later that evening, a letter waiting inside Jack's mailbox would threaten everything he had spent 12 years protecting. The mailbox stood at the end of the gravel driveway, leaning slightly from years of Ohio winters. Jack Carter stopped beside it after sunset, still wearing his grease-stained work shirt from the garage. Emma was already halfway to the farmhouse, humming to herself as she carried her backpack and the leftover pie a church volunteer had insisted they take home. The evening air smelled faintly of cut grass and approaching rain. Jack opened the mailbox and found a single certified envelope resting inside. His expression did not change, but his hand tightened slightly around the paper. Some letters carried news. Others carried consequences. He slipped it beneath his arm and walked toward the porch without opening it. Inside the farmhouse, Emma spread her homework across the kitchen table, while Jack reheated leftover chicken soup. The overdue utility bill still sat near the refrigerator, partially hidden beneath a stack of school forms. He could have opened the envelope immediately. Instead, he helped Emma solve a math problem, signed a permission slip for an upcoming field trip, and repaired the loose strap on her backpack with a small sewing kit he kept in a drawer. Responsibility had taught him a simple rule years ago. Take care of your child first. Worry about yourself later. Only after Emma went upstairs to shower did Jack finally sit alone at the table. The envelope crackled softly beneath his fingers. His eyes moved across the page once. Then again. The words seemed to pull every sound from the room. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside. Not anger. Not panic. Just the quiet exhaustion of a man facing one more burden he had hoped would never return. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Rain tapped against the windshield of the old pickup truck as Jack drove Emma to school. She chatted about a science presentation while he listened attentively, asking questions whenever she paused. When they reached the crowded school hallway entrance, he handed her a packed lunch and smiled. Good luck today. Emma grinned. You always say that. Because I always mean it. She disappeared through the doors, unaware that her father remained parked outside for nearly a minute afterward, watching to make sure she got inside safely. Across town, Victoria Sterling found herself thinking about that conversation in the diner far more than she expected. She had met senators, investors, celebrities, and Fortune 500 executives. Yet somehow the mechanic who drove a 15-year-old pickup truck occupied more space in her thoughts than any of them. Her curiosity finally won. By lunchtime, she found herself standing inside Carter Automotive. The scent of oil and fresh coffee filled the garage. Jack was kneeling beside an aging sedan owned by a local nurse. He worked methodically, explaining the repair while simultaneously showing a teenage apprentice how to perform it correctly. There was no impatience in his voice. No need to impress anyone. Just competence wrapped in humility. When the nurse quietly admitted she could not afford the full repair bill until next month, Jack adjusted a few figures on the invoice and handed it back without discussion. This will get you safely to work, he said. We will figure out the rest later. Victoria noticed the relief in the woman's eyes. More importantly, she noticed something else. Jack never looked around to see who had witnessed the kindness. He simply returned to work. That evening, Victoria sat in her hotel room staring at a file she had requested from a local attorney. It contained public records connected to Jack Carter. Most of it seemed ordinary. Employment history, property taxes, vehicle registration. Then she reached one document dated 11 years earlier. Her eyes narrowed, because suddenly the certified letter, the quiet sadness behind Jack's eyes, and the life he had built around protecting his daughter began to connect in ways she had not expected. And for the first time, Victoria realized she knew almost nothing about the man everyone else thought they understood. Victoria slept poorly that night. The file she had opened in her hotel room remained on the desk beside the bed, its pages neatly stacked but impossible to ignore. 11 years earlier, according to the court records, Jack Carter had voluntarily accepted full legal guardianship under circumstances most people would have walked away from. There were references to medical expenses, emergency petitions, and a long series of financial obligations that seemed to stretch far beyond what a small-town mechanic should have been able to manage. Yet the documents revealed almost nothing about why. By morning, the mystery bothered her enough that she canceled a breakfast meeting and drove across town instead. The rain had cleared, leaving puddles shimmering beside storefronts and church lawns. Victoria spotted Jack's familiar blue pickup truck parked outside a grocery store. She almost continued driving. Then she noticed what he was doing. Jack stood near the shopping carts helping a young mother load groceries into her minivan, while balancing a restless toddler on one hip. The woman looked exhausted. Her younger child sat in a wheelchair beside the vehicle. Jack carefully secured several bags before kneeling to adjust a loose strap on the wheelchair footrest. He worked with the calm efficiency of someone who had done similar things many times before. No audience. No press. Just quiet help offered without hesitation. Victoria remained in her car longer than she intended. Something about the scene stayed with her. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt genuine. In her world, people often performed kindness when others were watching. Jack seemed most comfortable when nobody was paying attention. Later that afternoon, another unexpected opportunity arrived. Emma's middle school science fair was being held in the gymnasium, and Sterling Industries happened to be sponsoring several educational programs in the district. Victoria attended as a corporate representative. The school hallway buzzed with parents carrying poster boards and children nervously rehearsing presentations. Folding tables stretched across the gym floor beneath bright fluorescent lights. When Victoria entered, she immediately spotted Emma standing beside a display about renewable energy. Jack stood several feet away, refusing to hover but remaining close enough to offer support if needed. Emma looked confident at first. Then one of the electronic components on her project suddenly stopped working. Her smile disappeared. Panic flashed across her face. Several judges were already approaching. Victoria watched Jack move toward her. Not hurried, not frustrated, calm. He knelt beside the display and listened while Emma explained the problem. Then he handed her a small screwdriver from his pocket. "You know what to do," he said gently. "Ido?" Emma asked. "You built it. Trust yourself." He did not fix the project for her. He guided her confidence back to where it belonged. Within minutes, Emma located a loose connection and restored the display herself. The relief on her face lit the entire corner of the gym. Victoria felt something shift inside her as she watched father and daughter exchange a quiet smile. It was a simple moment, yet it revealed more about Jack than any file ever could. He was not raising a child to depend on him. He was raising her to believe in herself. As families began leaving the school parking lot that evening, Victoria finally approached them. Emma greeted her politely. Jack looked surprised but not uncomfortable. For the first time, the conversation between them felt natural. Less like two strangers from different worlds and more like two people standing on common ground. Then Emma mentioned something that made Victoria's attention sharpen immediately. "Dad still goes to the hospital every Thursday," she said casually. "Even when he is tired." Jack's expression changed for the briefest moment. Not anger, not fear. Something quieter. Something protective. Because whatever waited for him in that hospital waiting room was clearly a part of the story he had worked very hard to keep hidden. And Victoria suddenly wanted to know why. The question lingered long after they left the school parking lot. Why did Jack Carter spend every Thursday at the hospital? Victoria considered asking directly, but something about the look on his face had stopped her. It was not shame. It was protection. The kind of protection people build around wounds that never fully heal. 2 days later, she found herself thinking about it again while reviewing acquisition reports in a conference room overlooking the town square. Numbers filled the screen. Profit projections, property assessments, expansion plans. Yet her attention drifted toward the window where she could see Jack's blue pickup truck parked outside the diner across the street. Before she realized what she was doing, she was already heading downstairs. The diner was crowded with the usual lunchtime crowd. Retirees discussing football, teachers grabbing coffee between classes, construction workers filling booths along the back wall. Victoria entered just in time to see Jack paying for 2 meals that were not his own. A young father sat nearby with 3 small children and an expression that suggested he had counted every dollar in his wallet twice already. Jack quietly handed the waitress his card and returned to his table before anyone noticed. Or almost anyone. Victoria noticed. Yet before she could process it, another conversation caught her attention. 2 businessmen seated near the counter were discussing Jack. "Good guy," one said. "Still makes terrible financial decisions." The other laughed. "You mean spending money he does not have?" "Exactly. That old house should have been sold years ago." Victoria frowned. The comments were casual, but they planted a seed of doubt. Was Jack generous because he was kind? Or because he simply could not say no? There was a difference. And for the first time since meeting him, uncertainty returned. That afternoon, Victoria's doubts grew stronger. While reviewing public property records connected to the upcoming acquisition, she discovered that Jack had taken out a second mortgage several years earlier. The numbers startled her. Combined with medical expenses and overdue obligations, his financial situation appeared far worse than she imagined. Why would someone already struggling continue carrying so many burdens? The answer seemed irresponsible, almost reckless. Yet nothing else she had observed about him matched that conclusion. The contradiction refused to make sense. The following Thursday provided another clue. Victoria happened to be leaving a meeting at the regional medical center when she spotted Jack walking through the hospital waiting room carrying a paper bag from a grocery store. He looked tired, more tired than she had ever seen him. She watched from across the lobby as he greeted an elderly woman sitting alone near the windows. The woman's face brightened immediately. Jack handed her the bag, revealing fresh fruit, magazines, and a knitted blanket folded neatly inside. Then he sat beside her. Not for a minute, not for a polite greeting. He stayed nearly an hour, listening, smiling, helping her complete paperwork when her hands trembled too much to write clearly. Victoria eventually approached the front desk. "Family?" she asked quietly. The volunteer receptionist glanced toward Jack and smiled. "No." Victoria blinked. "No. He has been coming here almost every Thursday for years. Visits patients who do not get many visitors. Helps however he can." The answer unsettled her more than she expected, because it destroyed the simplest explanation. Jack was not helping out of obligation. He was choosing to, again and again. Yet later that evening, another discovery complicated everything. While organizing documents from the file she had requested, Victoria found a legal notice attached to the certified letters case number. Her expression slowly changed as she read the final paragraph. Because unless something happened soon, Jack Carter stood to lose the very farmhouse he had sacrificed so much to protect. And somehow Emma still had no idea. The legal notice sat on Victoria's desk long after sunset. Outside her hotel window, traffic lights blinked over nearly empty streets while rain tapped softly against the glass. She had reviewed acquisitions worth hundreds of millions of dollars without feeling emotional. Yet this single file refused to leave her thoughts. According to the documents, the farmhouse Jack Carter fought so hard to keep could be lost within months. Property debt, medical debt, years of accumulated obligations. None of it made sense beside the man she had observed helping strangers, mentoring teenagers, and raising his daughter with extraordinary care. The numbers told one story. His actions told another. By Friday afternoon, curiosity became something deeper. Concern. Victoria drove past Carter Automotive and noticed the familiar blue pickup truck missing from its usual spot. One of the mechanics pointed her toward the county hospital. The answer surprised her less than it should have. She found Jack in a quiet wing near a long hospital waiting room lined with faded chairs and vending machines. He was not visiting the elderly woman from before. He was helping a teenage boy assemble a model airplane on a folding table. The boy appeared to be recovering from a serious illness. Every few minutes he laughed at something Jack said. The sound felt rare and precious in a place filled with worry. Victoria remained unseen for several moments. Then a nurse recognized her and quietly approached. "You know Mr. Carter?" she asked. Victoria nodded. "A little." The nurse smiled warmly. "Then you know he has been coming here almost every week for years." Victoria hesitated. "Why?" The nurse's expression softened. "Because someone once did the same thing for his daughter." Something shifted inside Victoria. The nurse continued. 11 years earlier, Emma had spent months moving between specialists after a severe medical condition nearly changed the course of her childhood. During that time, a stranger had regularly visited the pediatric ward carrying books, puzzles, and small gifts for frightened children. According to the nurse, Jack never forgot what that kindness meant. So when Emma recovered, he quietly promised himself he would return the favor for as many families as possible. Victoria looked toward Jack again. Suddenly the hospital visits made sense. The grocery bags, the patients, the long Thursdays. This was not charity. It was gratitude transformed into service. Later that evening, another piece of the puzzle finally emerged. Jack was leaving the hospital when Victoria approached him in the parking garage. Rain drummed softly against the concrete structure above them. For a moment neither spoke. Then Victoria carefully mentioned the legal notice. Jack's shoulders lowered slightly. Not because he was angry, she knew. Because he seemed tired of carrying the burden alone. They sat inside his pickup truck while rain streaked across the windshield. And for the first time he told her part of the truth. 11 years ago, after Emma's medical crisis, the mounting bills nearly destroyed them financially. He refinanced the farmhouse, then refinanced again when unexpected complications appeared. Later came legal expenses connected to securing Emma's future after circumstances involving her guardianship became uncertain. Every decision had cost him something. Yet every decision had protected his daughter. "I never regretted any of it," he said quietly. Victoria stared at him. Most people spent their lives protecting their assets. Jack had spent his protecting a child. In that moment, the image she carried of him changed forever. Not because he was perfect, not because he was successful, but because every hardship in his life traced back to love. As they sat in silence, Victoria finally understood why Emma looked at her father the way she did. Then Jack glanced toward the dashboard clock and immediately started the truck. "I need to get home," he said. "Emma has a choir performance tonight." Victoria smiled fondly. Of course he did. But neither of them knew that before the night ended, a conversation inside the school auditorium would bring an even more surprising truth into the open. The school auditorium glowed with warm light as families filled row after row of folding seats. Programs rustled. Children whispered backstage. The scent of coffee from a volunteer table drifted through the lobby. Jack arrived with barely 10 minutes to spare, still wearing the same work shirt he had worn at the hospital. Emma spotted him immediately from behind the choir curtain and smiled with visible relief. No matter how busy life became, he always showed up. Victoria took a seat several rows behind them. She had not planned to attend. Yet after their conversation in the pickup truck, something told her this evening mattered. She was beginning to understand that Jack's life was not built around work or money, or even survival. It was built around promises. The performance began. Children sang. Parents applauded. The ordinary beauty of a small-town American school event unfolded exactly as it had for generations. Yet halfway through the evening, Victoria noticed something unusual. Several teachers greeted Jack by name. A school counselor stopped to thank him. Even the principal crossed the gym floor to shake his hand. None of them treated him like a struggling mechanic. They treated him like someone whose presence mattered. Curious, Victoria eventually approached the principal near the refreshment table. "Mr. Carter seems popular," she said lightly. The principal smiled. "That man has quietly helped half the families in this district." Victoria frowned. "How?" "Tutoring students after work. Repairing vehicles for parents who cannot afford repairs. Organizing winter coat drives. Fixing broken equipment at the school." The principal shook his head. "Most people never hear about it because he never talks about it." Victoria looked across the auditorium toward Jack. For years she had worked alongside executives who carefully documented every charitable contribution. Jack seemed determined to hide his. The realization stayed with her long after the concert ended. The following week brought new pressure. A final notice appeared in Jack's mailbox. The deadline attached to the farmhouse debt was moving closer. The amount due remained impossible for someone living paycheck to paycheck. Yet instead of spending his Saturday looking for help, Jack spent the morning repairing a church van in the church parking lot. The vehicle transported elderly residents to medical appointments. Without it, several people would lose access to care. By noon, grease covered his hands and sweat darkened his shirt. The pastor offered payment. Jack declined. "Use it for the fuel fund," he said. Victoria happened to arrive just in time to witness the exchange. The more she learned about him, the less his choices made sense according to the rules she had always followed. Financially, every hour he gave away pushed him further behind. Yet somehow the people around him kept moving forward because of him. That evening another mystery surfaced. While reviewing old community records connected to her company's property acquisition, Victoria found Jack's name attached to several successful grant applications submitted years earlier on behalf of local schools, medical programs, and community services. The applications were detailed, strategic, and remarkably effective. Millions of dollars in support had eventually reached the town through programs linked to those proposals. Victoria stared at the documents in disbelief. The writing demonstrated intelligence, planning, and organizational skill far beyond what anyone expected from a small-town mechanic. Yet Jack had never taken public credit. Not once. Hidden competence. Quiet service. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Later that night, Victoria sat alone in her hotel room looking at the grant records beside the foreclosure notice. For the first time she felt frustration. Not with Jack. With the unfairness of it all. How could a man who had spent years helping everyone else be the one facing the loss of his own home? Then her phone rang. The caller was an attorney connected to the legal case from 11 years earlier. His first sentence made her sit upright immediately. Because the story behind Emma's guardianship was far more complicated than Jack had revealed. And the truth could change everything. Victoria listened in silence as the attorney explained what had happened 11 years earlier. Outside her hotel window, dawn was just beginning to brighten the empty streets. Coffee sat untouched beside her laptop. She had expected complicated legal details. She had not expected heartbreak. Emma is not his biological daughter, the attorney said gently. For a moment Victoria thought she had misheard. The attorney continued. Years earlier, after the death of Jack's wife, circumstances surrounding a close family friend had left a young child without stable protection. Jack had been given an impossible choice. He could step away and rebuild his life. Or he could assume full responsibility for a frightened little girl facing an uncertain future. He chose the child. The legal battle that followed consumed years. Court hearings, medical decisions, financial guarantees, endless paperwork, every refinance, every debt, every sacrifice connected back to one decision. He stayed. Victoria slowly leaned back in her chair. Suddenly the guardianship records made sense. The mortgage, the hospital bills, the second jobs, the years of struggle. Jack had never been trying to save property. He had been trying to save a family. Later that morning, Victoria drove past the farmhouse. The old blue pickup truck sat beside the porch exactly where it always did. Through the kitchen window she could see Emma working on homework while Jack prepared breakfast before heading to the garage. The scene looked ordinary. Yet now she understood the extraordinary choice hidden beneath it. Emma laughed at something he said. Jack smiled back. Not because he had to. Because she was his daughter in every way that mattered. The discovery changed something inside Victoria. That afternoon she found herself stopping by the grocery store where Emma was helping collect canned goods for a local food drive. Jack arrived straight from work carrying several bags of donations despite his own financial troubles. He quietly placed them on the collection table. Emma beamed with pride. Victoria watched the exchange from a distance. The child clearly had no idea how much her father had given up for her. And perhaps that was exactly how Jack wanted it. Some sacrifices are offered freely, not as debts to be repaid but as gifts. Yet the truth did not remain hidden for long. Small towns have a way of carrying stories. By evening, fragments of the old guardianship case began resurfacing through conversations at the diner and church parking lot. Most people reacted with admiration. Some reacted with confusion. A few questioned why Jack had never told anyone. Others wondered whether keeping such a secret had been fair. The attention made Jack visibly uncomfortable. Recognition was never something he sought. When Victoria finally found him outside the garage after closing time, he was helping a teenager repair a bicycle under the fading glow of a security light. The conversation between them felt easier now. Less guarded. More honest. You never told Emma? Victoria asked quietly after the teenager left. Jack looked down at the wrench in his hands. She already knows what matters. And what is that? He smiled softly. That she was loved enough to be chosen. Victoria felt her throat tighten. Because in all her years of success, boardrooms and wealth, she had rarely heard a more beautiful definition of family. Yet even as understanding deepened between them, a new problem was approaching. The foreclosure deadline was now only weeks away. And unlike the secrets of the past, this threat could not be hidden. That night, as Jack sorted through bills beside the same overdue utility notice that had sat on his kitchen counter for months, Emma accidentally walked into the room and saw the stack of final warnings for the first time. The expression on her face told him immediately that the conversation he had been trying to postpone could no longer wait. The stack of notices slipped from Emma's hands and scattered across the kitchen floor. For a few seconds, neither she nor Jack moved. The farmhouse felt unusually quiet. The refrigerator hummed softly. Rain tapped against the windows. The overdue utility bill that had sat untouched for months suddenly seemed impossible to ignore. Emma slowly picked up one of the papers and read the words again. Final notice. Property action pending. Her face lost color. "Dad," she whispered. "Are we losing the house?" Jack had spent years protecting her from burdens she never should have carried. Yet in that moment he realized some truths could not be postponed forever. He pulled out a chair and sat beside her at the kitchen table where she had completed homework and science projects for years. The same table where birthdays had been celebrated. The same table where they had shared countless breakfasts before school. "I am trying to make sure that does not happen," he said gently. Emma stared at him. "Why did you not tell me?" The question hurt more than any bill ever could. Because it was not anger he heard. It was disappointment. For the first time in her life, his daughter felt excluded from the struggle they had always faced together. The next morning, the distance between them remained. Jack drove her to school in the familiar blue pickup truck, but their conversation felt different. Smaller. Careful. At the crowded school hallway entrance, Emma forced a smile before heading inside. Jack waited until she disappeared through the doors. Then he sat alone in the parking lot longer than usual. Losing the farmhouse would hurt. Losing Emma's trust felt unbearable. Meanwhile, word of the foreclosure situation began spreading more openly through town. People who admired Jack wanted to help. Some suggested fundraisers. Others proposed charity drives. Jack quietly declined every offer. Not because pride mattered. Because he refused to place responsibility for his family onto people already carrying struggles of their own. That afternoon at Carter Automotive, he stayed late repairing vehicles, taking on extra work, searching for solutions that never seemed large enough. Yet even under pressure he remained himself. When a customer arrived with a flat tire and no money, Jack repaired it anyway. When a teenage apprentice made an expensive mistake, Jack calmly taught him how to fix it instead of assigning blame. Responsibility did not disappear when life became difficult. Victoria watched much of this from a distance. The more she learned about Jack, the more she understood that his greatest strength was not perseverance. It was love. Every decision he made pointed toward protecting someone else. By evening, she visited the farmhouse for the first time. Emma answered the door. The teenager tried to appear cheerful, but her eyes revealed exhaustion. Inside, moving boxes sat near the hallway closet. Not because Jack had surrendered. Because responsible fathers prepare for outcomes they hope never arrive. Victoria found him on the back porch looking across the dark fields. The conversation that followed was quiet, honest, painfully human. "She thinks I should have told her sooner," Jack admitted. "Maybe she is right." Victoria nodded. "She is scared." "I know." The hardest part was not the debt. Not the uncertainty. It was knowing that the one person he had spent years protecting now felt alone. Later that night, after Victoria left, Emma discovered an old storage box while searching for family photographs in the attic. Inside were legal records, hospital receipts, letters and handwritten notes spanning more than a decade. Page after page revealed sacrifices she had never known existed. Sacrifices made for her. As tears filled her eyes, one document slipped free from the folder and landed on the floor. It was a letter written years earlier by someone whose name she had never seen before. And the truth contained in that letter was about to reveal why Jack Carter had chosen her long before anyone asked him to. Emma sat alone in the attic long after midnight, surrounded by boxes filled with pieces of a life she thought she understood. Rain tapped softly against the roof while the old farmhouse creaked around her. One by one, she read the letters and documents spread across the floor. Hospital invoices, legal filings, handwritten notes, receipts from second jobs, pages that told the story of a man who had quietly given away years of comfort, security, and opportunity to make sure a frightened little girl would never feel abandoned. Then she opened the letter that had fallen from the folder. It had been written by the family friend whose crisis had changed everything 11 years earlier. Near the end, one sentence made Emma cover her mouth with trembling hands. "Jack did not take responsibility because anyone asked him to. He chose you before the courts ever did." Tears rolled down her cheeks. For years she had believed she was lucky to have Jack as a father. Only now did she understand the truth. He had chosen her again and again every single day. The next morning before sunrise, Emma walked quietly into the kitchen. Jack was already there, studying bills beside the familiar utility notice and drinking coffee from a chipped mug. He looked tired, older than she remembered. For a moment she simply stood there looking at him. Then she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Jack froze in surprise. "I am sorry," she whispered. "For what?" Emma wiped her eyes. "For thinking you did not trust me." The silence that followed felt sacred. Jack gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "I was trying to protect you." "I know." For the first time in weeks, the distance between them disappeared. Not because the problems were solved, because truth had finally replaced fear. Later that afternoon, something remarkable began unfolding across town. Not through luck, not through charity, through the consequences of years of quiet service. The principal remembered the grant proposals Jack had written. The pastor remembered the church van repairs. Families remembered winter coat drives, repaired vehicles, hospital visits, tutoring sessions, and countless acts of kindness. At the diner, people began sharing stories. At the grocery store, more stories followed. In the hospital waiting room, nurses spoke about the man who had comforted frightened families for years. None of these people had been asked to help. They simply refused to stay silent any longer. Victoria watched it happen in amazement. She had spent her career studying influence and leadership. Yet she had never seen anything like this. Jack had built something more valuable than wealth. He had built trust. That evening, the community gathered in the church parking lot for a town meeting originally intended to discuss local development projects. Instead, conversation turned toward Jack Carter. One by one, people stood. Teachers, nurses, mechanics, parents, elderly residents. Each shared a story of how he had quietly helped them when nobody else knew. Jack looked visibly uncomfortable as the attention grew. Recognition had never been his goal. Yet the emotional justice of the moment could no longer be avoided. Finally, Emma stepped forward. The crowd fell silent. Her voice shook slightly at first. "Most of you know my dad as the mechanic who helps everybody." She glanced toward Jack. "I know him as the man who chose me when he did not have to." A hush settled across the gathering. Even Victoria felt tears sting her eyes. Emma continued. "When people talk about family, they usually talk about blood. But my dad taught me something better. Family is who stays." No applause followed immediately. Just silence. The kind of silence that appears when people recognize something true. In that moment, every sacrifice Jack had hidden was finally seen. Not as weakness. Not as failure. As character. As integrity. As love. The weeks that followed did not bring miracles. They brought something stronger. Opportunities created by relationships Jack had spent years building. Community programs he had helped establish connected him with legitimate housing assistance and financial restructuring resources he had never pursued for himself. Several organizations he had quietly supported stepped forward with professional guidance. The farmhouse remained theirs because the foundation of trust he had built over a decade finally returned to support him when he needed it most. Months later, on a warm spring evening, Jack sat on the farmhouse porch watching the sun settle across the fields. Emma laughed while working on a school project at the picnic table. Victoria sat nearby, no longer a curious outsider but a trusted friend whose respect had grown into something deeper and steadier over time. No grand declarations were needed. The strongest connections rarely required them. The old pickup truck rested in the driveway. The mailbox still leaned slightly. The farmhouse still carried the marks of hard years. Yet everything felt different. Because the house had never been the thing worth saving. The family inside it was. Jack looked toward Emma and smiled. She smiled back. In the end, his greatest achievement was not surviving hardship. It was proving that quiet strength, dignity, responsibility, and love can build a family strong enough to weather any storm. And sometimes the people who seem to have the least are the very ones who leave the richest legacy behind.